Welcome, and thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Rob Foster.
And I'm Connie Hathaway. Tonight, we continue with our investigation into the shocking story from Harford County, Maryland, as we look at the apparent terrorist attack that has struck panic and fear into the heart of all America. 10 days ago, terrorists struck at Harford Mall using deadly poison gas, killing 10, seriously injuring 24, and requiring hospitalization for dozens more. Rob?
That's right, Connie. Even more disturbing, no one has claimed responsibility for this terrible attack, and police still have no one in custody.
It was a day like any other in quiet suburban Maryland, with temperatures in the 90s. It was a typical hot July day. Many shoppers took refuge from the heat and humidity, escaping to the air-conditioned comfort of Harford Mall, until disaster struck. This footage came from the mall security camera system and shows what police now believe to be the deadly device being planted by an unknown perpetrator. Watch again as we digitally enhance this image and run it in slow motion. Soon, a busboy clearing tables moved the dripping package from the floor to the top of the trash receptacle. Authorities now believe this device released a poison gas into the mall, which has killed 10 and sickened dozens more innocent shoppers. Officials have identified the gas released as sarin, the same deadly chemical used in the Tokyo subway attack in 1995. As we see here, the first victim was 48-year-old Robert Morton. Several nearby patrons rushed to his aid, while many others looked on, resulting in a small crowd gathered near the trash receptacle and the leaking package. In addition to those victims who died inside the mall, 2 others died later. One while receiving medical care outside the mall, and another in the ambulance on the way to the hospital.
Connie, there was a camera crew at the mall recording a commercial nearby, and we have been able to obtain the dramatic footage you're about to see from on the scene. We must warn you, this is actual footage from the mall and may be disturbing, especially for our younger viewers.
From Harford Mall, this is... What up, Steve? Steve, come over here. Look at this. Something going on here. Excuse me. This is Mike with Nothing Much News. What exactly is going on here? Okay. Oh, Steve, get out of here, man.
The mall security camera shows that the camera crew soon fell victim to the terrorist's deadly attack. An alert security officer was monitoring the scene back at the security office and had put in a call to 911 shortly after observing Mr. Morton's collapse. This dramatic audio recording is taken from the call the security officer placed to Harford County 911.
Harford County 911.
Yes, this is Vince DePringer. I'm a security guard here at Harford Mall.
Yes, sir.
We may have a medical emergency here.
Okay, and the address there?
Harford Mall in Bel Air.
Okay, and the problem there, sir?
Elderly gentleman has collapsed, holding his chest. It looks like a heart attack to me.
Okay, is he conscious right now?
It's hard to tell. I'm looking through the security cameras, and there's a lot of people around him.
Okay, can you tell if he's alert and able to talk?
I can't tell.
Is he sweaty or changing?
The 911 operator responded by dispatching an ambulance and emergency medical crew to the mall for what she thought was just a medical emergency. We now know that what was actually happening was far more sinister. We'll be back in a moment.
We're back, and joining us now is Bill Petrie, a retired government scientist who for over 30 years played a major role in the development of American chemical weapons. Bill, we know now that the terrorist who caused this incident used a deadly nerve gas called sarin. What can you tell us about this deadly nerve agent?
Well, sarin, or GB, as it's commonly referred to, is a colorless, odorless liquid in a pure form. If it isn't pure, as is likely to be the case in a terrorist attack, then it may have a faint odor, like juicy fruit. It's highly volatile, meaning it forms a vapor cloud readily. It's the same compound that was used in the Tokyo subway attack in 1995. Now, sarin is so popular with these terrorist groups because, unfortunately, it's not that difficult to produce, and there's a substantial quantity of information readily available to those who want to make the compound.
Can you tell us something about how the agent affected so many people?
Well, this is a highly toxic substance. It's designed to injure and kill thousands of soldiers at a time on the battlefield. It is, in essence, an insecticide for people. A person need breathe only a very small amount of this agent to be affected by it. It acts very rapidly. Initial symptoms can occur within seconds, actually. Death can occur within minutes. It affected so many people in this incident, predominantly due to the deadliness of the agent and the effects of the mall's air circulation system, which unfortunately served to distribute the agent vapor throughout the food court area of the mall.
We have an illustration of how this chemical spread.
Yes. The device, once activated, began producing agent vapors. The circulation of air in the mall helped to transport these vapors throughout the food court and the adjacent sections of the mall, affecting everyone in or passing through this vicinity. Now, keep in mind that even though it's so deadly, it's difficult to disseminate it so that large numbers of people receive a lethal dose. Yes, 10 people did die in this attack, but the vast majority of the people in the mall did not receive a lethal dose of the agent, and they survived the attack.
Bill, how exactly does this nerve agent work?
Well, in very simple terms, sarin acts to interfere with nerve transmission. Normally, the body has a mechanism to turn nerve impulses on and off to properly control muscles and glands. Nerve agents interfere with this mechanism, so nerve impulses are uncontrolled, causing the muscles to constrict continually and glands to secrete large amounts of fluid. The visible signs you see are tearing from the eyes, copious discharge from the nose and the mouth, and convulsions. Eventually, this overstimulation can lead to paralysis and to death. Other physical symptoms include very pronounced pinpointing of the pupils. Now, the victims in the Tokyo incident described that everything suddenly got dark. There's a tightness of the chest, difficulty breathing, coughing, and vomiting.
We know there are other deadly warfare agents out there. Can you tell us something about them and how deadly they are?
Well, in addition to sarin, there are several other nerve agents. The most deadly of all is the nerve agent called VX. However, unlike sarin, VX does not readily produce vapors at room temperature, and therefore it's generally a liquid skin contact hazard. However, VX is many times more toxic than sarin, even through skin contact. And should it be vaporized or aerosolized, the impact would be devastating. Another class of agents is vesicants, or as they're more commonly referred to, the blister agents. These agents pose both a vapor and a liquid hazard to all exposed skin and mucous membranes. The most well-known of these agents is mustard gas, which was used extensively during World War I, you remember. Mustard agent has a very strong garlic or mustard odor, which is how it got its name. Now, on the skin, it results in reddening of the skin and eventually large blisters. And when breathed, it severely irritates our respiratory system, resulting in coughing and sputum. A major problem with mustard agent is that although it begins damaging body tissues immediately, its physical signs and symptoms are delayed for hours or even days, depending on the degree of exposure.
We have a demonstration of that in this video footage.
Briefly, this footage shows the effects of nerve and mustard agents. First, we see the pinpointing of the pupils and the extreme secretions from the eyes, the nose, and mouth caused by the nerve agents. As I said, the mustard agent causes reddening of the skin, followed by blistering, as well as damage to the respiratory system.
Thank you, Mr. Petrie. We'll be back with more questions in a few moments.
Rob, we pick up our coverage of the event at Harford Mall with the mall security camera again. as we see the EMTs dispatched from the 911 center entering the food court.
The medical team realized too late that this was no ordinary medical emergency. Soon after they started to render assistance to the victims, they also became victims themselves.
Tragically, all 3 EMTs fell victim while trying to save the lives of the others in the mall.
Right after the 3 EMTs were afflicted by the terrorist device, another call came into the 911 Operations Center. Let's listen.
Harford County 911.
Yes, this is security at Harford Mall. We've got a big problem here.
Okay, what's going on, sir?
At the food court, there's people staggering. Several of them have collapsed. We called a little earlier about one gentleman, and now a lot more people seem to have caught whatever he had.
Okay, what do you think might be going on there?
Within minutes, more ambulances, along with police and fire units, began arriving at the mall as responders realized the scope of the emergency. A TV news crew heard the dispatch and arrived at the mall just before the first backup ambulance pulled in. We have with us in the studio tonight Fire Chief Tom Belford, whose fire company was among those first on the scene of the tragedy. Now, Chief Belford, what was the situation when you got there?
People were exiting the mall from all entrances. There were people staggering, coughing, some vomiting, some being helped by others. Some were injured not due to the agent, but by the crowd's rush to get out of the mall, which further complicated things. We tried to marshal everyone into an area where we could control them, but some ran by us.
And then what happened?
We were worried about our 3 guys who'd gone in and hadn't come back out of the mall. I told my guys to suit up and start standard testing procedures. When those came up negative, we figured this was a serious hazmat situation requiring the hazmat team in Level A, and we withdrew. That's one of the hardest things to do. Overcome your impulse to render immediate assistance to the people you see overcome by an event like this, and back out of the area for the safety of yourself and your team.
What happened next?
Dispatch called for more backup medical units and a hazmat team. As soon as they got there, they began setting up the decontamination corridors and rendering medical assistance. And we got some help from the Bel Air Police Department, too. They started to secure the area, gathering up the stragglers and the people who came out of the other mall exits, and set up traffic control around the mall. And we can't control an event like this without support from law enforcement agencies in the area, and we were lucky that they got there so soon. Meanwhile, we were doing our best to care for the people who had escaped the mall, but there were so many of them, and this stuff works so fast. At 1 minute, a victim is ambulatory, just coughing, and then suddenly they go into convulsions and die. We couldn't act fast enough.
We need to take a break. We'll be back with Chief Belford after this.
We're back with our coverage of the event at Harford Mall. As we've seen, a package was planted by an unknown terrorist that released deadly sarin gas into the mall, overcoming and killing patrons and emergency responders, and severely injuring many other shoppers. Fire and police teams arrived quickly and assessed the situation. Chief Tom Belford's team was among those first on the scene. Before the break, Chief Belford described the chaotic scene he encountered upon arrival. Chief, what actions did you take when you arrived at the scene?
Well, as I said, we were worried about our 3 guys who had gone in and hadn't come back out of the mall. I told my guys to suit up and start standard testing procedures. And we checked for oxygen level, carbon monoxide, and LEL, lower explosive limit. When they came up negative, and when we saw the medical team was down, we knew there was some fast-acting airborne hazard requiring Level A, and we needed to withdraw. Level A is the highest level of protection emergency responders have, a fully encapsulated protective suit. Since we didn't know what we were dealing with, the situation requires a hazmat team with Level A suits.
What happened next?
We set up emergency decon for the victims, established our control zones, and started to triage the folks who had managed to get out of the mall.
Chief, we now know that 3 paramedics died responding to this tragedy. Why did this happen?
The EMTs were responding to what they thought was a single medical emergency when they went in there. Sure, they maybe should have stopped to think about what the cause could have been, especially when they saw the multiple victims. But they wanted to get in there and save lives. If only they'd had more accurate information before they got there. For instance, if we'd only known sooner that there were multiple victims, the dispatcher probably could have warned the EMTs before they entered the mall.
If you had to do it over again, what would you have done differently?
Well, as we all know, hindsight is always 20/20. But one of the problems we had was the large number of victims, many of whom were terrified and in a real state of panic. We couldn't control them all initially. This led to problems as we tried to decon and treat them all, especially when the hazmat and medical units arrived. People were stumbling over each other. If I had to do it all over again, I'd have made sure that we moved the ambulatory people further away from the mall entrance so as not to interfere with the actions of the hazmat team and other response units.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes. I'd just like to say it was an extremely chaotic situation, and there is only a very brief opportunity to save someone who has received a lethal dose of nerve agent, or to prevent someone from receiving a lethal dose. It's possible that if we'd recognized the signs and symptoms immediately and been prepared to administer the proper antidote, then at least 2 of the individuals who died during medical treatment might have been saved.
Thank you, Chief Belford.
We have with us Chief Doug Johnson, who was in charge of the response to this terrorist attack. Chief Johnson, what happened next at the mall?
Well, Chief Tandy's hazmat team got there and were briefed by Chief Belford's company that the EMTs must have gone down from the effects of some sort of airborne hazard. So we weren't about to send in any more unprotected responders until we knew just what we were dealing with. We realized we had some sort of serious hazmat situation in there requiring level A protection. We began setting up our decon quarters and triage and preparing the hazmat team. It takes time to do all this, and we don't send the hazmat team in until we have the ability to decon them whenever they have to exit. In the meantime, we proceeded to try to care for hundreds of people who had evacuated the mall, maintain control of the site, and identify requirements for handling this emergency. This was an extremely difficult situation that required an awful lot of response units to handle.
When we return, we'll continue our investigation. Chief Johnson will explain how he managed the complexities of responding to this terrible incident.
We're back. We've been exploring the events surrounding the deadly poison gas attack at Harford Mall in Bel Air, Maryland, 10 days ago. With us again is Chief Doug Johnson, who was in charge of the emergency response elements on the scene. Chief, why did it take so long to determine what the nature of the problem was?
You have to understand, the initial calls were for a man having a possible heart attack. That was what we responded to. Now, perhaps if the EMTs had transmitted back the symptoms they were seeing at the food court right away, we might have picked up earlier that we were dealing with this nerve agent, or at least some sort of organophosphate poisoning. But even after the EMTs went down, we didn't have information that would have indicated this was not something like carbon monoxide poisoning. It wasn't until Chief Belford's team went in that we suspected we were dealing with some sort of highly toxic environment.
Why did so many people die in this attack? The Tokyo incident involved thousands of people in a crowded subway, and 12 people died.
Well, that's a complicated issue. For one thing, the Tokyo attack involved very low-grade sarin, and the attack was poorly executed by the terrorists. Truth is, in both cases, we were somewhat lucky. This stuff is so deadly that if you changed any of a number of factors, we could have easily been dealing with dozens or even hundreds or thousands of deaths and victims.
We know it took hours to care for all the people at the mall. What special problems did you encounter, and how did you handle these problems?
Well, the sheer numbers of people caused problems. Every person at the mall had to be medically evaluated, decontaminated, and clothed. Once we suspected we were dealing with chemical nerve agent, we instructed everyone to strip to their underwear, and we performed what we call emergency decon by hosing everyone down with water.
We understand you encountered some problems with people cooperating, especially when they were instructed to remove their clothes. Tell us about that.
Yes, well, many people, especially women, were reluctant or refused to undress. This was particularly true for those people who were not in or near the food court and exited from other parts of the mall. These people had seen nothing, and many of them were exhibiting no symptoms at all. They had no idea what was going on and had no sense of immediate danger to themselves.
How did you handle that?
Yeah, we stressed the danger of vapors being embedded in their clothes, or that they may have stepped in or otherwise contacted the hazard. Those that still refused to undress were separated from the rest of the crowd to ensure they didn't pose an off-gassing hazard to everyone else. We then attempted to at least convince them to be hosed off with their clothes on.
Once people removed their clothes and were hosed down, how did you provide clothing or shelter for all of them?
As I'm sure you're aware, we had some problems initially. We didn't have on hand the resources to provide cover for that many people. Fortunately, it was a very warm day, so we didn't have any exposure concerns. I had my logistics officer coordinate with the Emergency Operations Center and local merchants to round up hundreds of blankets, sheets, and anything else we could get our hands on.
How did you manage to control everything that was going on? It must have been difficult.
It was extremely difficult. As soon as I knew the magnitude of what we were up against, I delegated responsibilities to my staff and sector chiefs. It was especially crucial to have someone responsible for logistics, as I indicated before, as well as staging of all the support elements, safety, and planning. I also knew there'd be a massive media response, so I requested a public information officer. Initially, the media was a problem, especially the camera crew that arrived at the scene almost as soon as I did. They were getting in the way, as they're apt to do, and I had to request police assistance to handle them. But eventually, the media proved to be very helpful in reducing public panic and by warning and educating the local public as to the limits of the danger. For a few days, public fear and paranoia were rampant, and it seemed that everybody in the county with a runny nose was showing up at area emergency rooms. This created a real problem for our hospitals, and just as the large number of victims created problems for responders, the number of response units involved created problems for me and my command staff. There was so much message traffic on the radios, it was hard to understand what was being said at times. As more and more units arrived, we ran into some space management problems too, especially near the food court entrance.
How important were the police in responding to this tragedy?
Absolutely huge. While the fire, EMS, and hazmat teams were dealing with the hazard and casualties, the police were busy cordoning off the entire area. They were quick to control those people leaving from all the other mall exits. Some slipped through, but by and large, the police rounded up most everyone. In addition, they secured the incident perimeter, set up traffic control of the road network, and provided security for the various response sectors and for me and my command post. In fact, we may have had a real problem if the police hadn't set up traffic control as quickly as they did. A charity fundraiser involving hundreds of motorcycle riders was scheduled to drive right past the mall in the middle of the incident. Of course, if the attack had been outside or if the agent had escaped the mall, we may have had a real problem since the local police didn't have respiratory protection and all the firefighters were busy caring for the victims.
We understand that a hospital in the area had to be shut down and that several local managed care facilities were exposed to the deadly poison. Why did this happen?
Well, as I said before, even though the police did a great job of containing the people that had been in the mall, some people did slip through. Some of these people went directly to the hospital or other facilities. We did notify the hospitals fairly quickly. The hospital shutdown was brief, as they were able to determine that the individuals who arrived at the emergency room were not in the immediate vicinity of the food court and the agent on the floor. The hospitals then shut all their exits but one and controlled access and screened all arriving patients. Unfortunately, we didn't think about the private doctors or managed care facilities.
Is there still a danger to the public?
No. All traces of the agent have been removed. The EPA, as well as other federal authorities, have brought in all their high-tech equipment and have been on the scene since the day it happened. They assure us that there's no longer any trace of agent present inside the mall or in the parking lots.
Chief, you used school buses to transport the large numbers of people to local hospitals. Are these school buses back transporting children to school? And if so, how do we know the children are in no danger?
Well, again, the experts have assured us that the buses are fine and the children are in no danger. However, we have been absolutely inundated with calls from concerned parents. If we had to do it all over again, we might look for other means to transport casualties instead of school buses.
Thank you, Chief Johnson. That concludes our coverage of this terrible incident. Thanks for joining us. For Connie Hathaway, I'm Rob Foster. Good evening.